And we are on. I'm so excited that we are getting to do this despite the technical difficulties. But thank you so much, David Kiva from EDF Action, for joining Latino Victory for this special presentation. I know we had a few technical difficulties early on, but I'm glad we were able to get together. I know some folks will be joining throughout the program. And then, of course, tons more folks will watch afterwards. So we'll get started by saying 3, 2, 1, which kicks off the recording. So, hi, everyone. This is Catherine Pichardo, President and CEO at Latino Victory. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm here with David Kiva of EDF Action and a real partner in our fight for our communities. And then, of course, someone who has a long history within the climate action space. So before we get started, David, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the environmental justice movement.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here, Catherine, today. I learned so much from Latino Victory every time we talk, including in this conversation, because this is the first time I've ever done a Substack live. So I look forward to you and Latino Victory introducing me to more new things, and I'll be better and smarter for it, and have enjoyed the journey together. I haven't worked exclusively in the climate space for all that long. It's been about 5+ years now, maybe even going on 6. But I met Latino Victory's board chair when we were two of the old guys working on the Biden campaign in 2019, and we became fast friends and immediate friends. My job then was to be the early states director for the Biden for President campaign. That was a job that had an expiration date on it. And I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was February 29th, 2020, when President Biden won the South Carolina primary and became ultimately the de facto Democratic nominee. After that job expired, the campaign needed something to do with me, and they asked if I would lead engagement with the climate community, and I said yes. And I've been learning from my peers and the leaders in this space ever since. First, as we built a really broad tent of supporters across the environmental movement behind the president's policies. And then I'd never worked in government a day in my life. I was in my 40s, but it wasn't how I saw myself serving. I'm like you, I'm a campaign guy. But having the opportunity to help the president make good on policies that I had certainly helped to socialize and a little bit to help to develop, it felt really important. So even though my wife and I have 2 small kids, we decided that we could give them a year or so, and I've been doing some version of that ever since. And I've been at EDF Action as the president for it'll be 4 years in February. So I'm excited about my journey. I still have an awful lot to learn, but I care deeply about climate and the environment.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that one important nuance is that when we talk about climate and the environment, it's really discussing policy from an economic lens, but also from an impact lens, and especially as it relates to healthcare outcomes. And we're going to talk a little bit about your most recent announcement that we did jointly, which is the Climate Vulnerability Index, which is a national initiative that I think will make a lot of good by alerting folks on what's really going on in our communities. But tell us a little bit about how you are messaging on climate, specifically as it relates to the economy and certainly health.
Absolutely. Look, I think what we're seeing from President Trump and the Trump administration is an effort to redefine energy as only being the dirtiest sources of energy, which are also happen to be the most expensive and most inefficient. So I think we all remember a time when environmental policy was perceived to involve trade-offs. You could either choose to do the right thing for the economy or for the environment, but you couldn't do both at the same time. We've turned a corner and we're in a place where you can do both at the same time. Unfortunately, the decisions that President Trump is making are taking us backwards. They're taking us backwards on progress on the environment, but they're also costing every ratepayer higher utility bills and taking away good paying jobs that were starting to flow into this country. I'm not, I call myself kind of lovingly a medical moron. No one wants me operating on them. I'm not the best person there is in the space to talk about um, health impacts, but the health impacts of the decisions that those guys are making are very, very real as well. And there's something that we all need to consider. And the Climate Vulnerability Index absolutely is a useful tool to help us um, do exactly that.
And for those who are not familiar with EDF Action, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and overall what your mission is and the work that you all do?
Absolutely. EDF Action is the advocacy partner. So C4 in if you're into the tax code and the IRS, it's the advocacy partner of the Environmental Defense Fund. So we're sort of unique in that we don't have an agenda of our own. We only exist to help the Environmental Defense Fund advance the policies that they help to develop and socialize and do so much work on as one of the leading environmental nonprofits in the world, and we do that in a couple of ways. The first is through advocacy, including what they call, again, in the tax code, express advocacy. Politics, as you know, is not a business that rewards subtlety. So having the opportunity to tell people, vote for or vote against this particular bill or piece of legislation, and to tell the constituents, the voters, the people, that hey, voting for this piece of legislation will have this impact on your life. Here's why it's good, or here's why if we're asking them to oppose it, it's bad. We also, as Latino Victory does as well, engage in elections because we believe that it kind of short circuits the system if you help to elect somebody who was already up on the issues that we care about. And I should say, before I just talk for too long, the example that Latino Victory sets every single day, you guys are so overt and so strong in talking about the notion that you're here to build political power for Latinos. I've learned from that example because I think sometimes when you're advocating for a series of policies instead of for a people, you can be a little bit shyer about it. Building political power for action on the issues that we care about is something that I care deeply about, and I learn from Latino Victory every time we talk, including this time.
Aw, thanks. We really appreciate your partnership, David. And look, the bottom line is, as you mentioned earlier, we are facing a lot of incoming from the Trump administration every single day, right? Whether we're the Latino community or we're fighting for our communities on climates or safety or economic opportunity, right? And so, in a world where politics and policies have gotten reduced to punchlines, um, tell me a little bit about what this climate vulnerability index is and how it could help folks identify issues within their communities and advocate for better policies.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you a little bit of the history of the Climate Vulnerability Index, too. It was started a couple of years ago in happier times. We were at about the 1 year mark of implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, which had available tons and tons of money for communities in need. And EDF determined that those communities needed the government needed a better sense of who really needed that funding the most. And those communities also needed a sense of how to advocate for themselves and where to go with the government. So it was a bilateral tool designed to help make policy that directly reached more people and help that reached more people. Unfortunately, and we advocated against it, and I know you did too, in the president's disastrous budget bill, which passed this summer and was signed, I think, on the 4th of July, right around there, although it feels like a lifetime ago, a lot of that funding went away. And but what that did was it made this tool that EDF had helped to develop along with other partners more valuable, not less. Because one of the things that I hear all the time that just drives me absolutely insane coming from President Trump and his administration is the notion that any sort of assistance for communities in need is really just like a political payoff. And we know that the opposite is the case. We know that communities who need the help because they've been raising their voices for a very long time, but they lacked political power and nobody cared to listen to them. So the response to assertions that this is all political payoff we could try to shout louder than they can, but I'm not sure that we could ever do that. Pointing to science and data and economics it's a core part of EDF's skill set. Pointing to the science and the data is the way forward to demonstrate that communities that need help need it because for too long they've been dumped on and marginalized.
For sure. And part of our work here at Latino Victory, as you know, is to engage voters around some of these important issues and often interconnecting the dots, right, as it relates to policies and the impact of their civic engagement, right? If you're not out there rallying or going to the civic meetings or even something as basic for us as voting, which many folks take for granted. Those are the actions that can move the needle, right, as it relates to all of these important issues. And so, as we move forward in this electoral cycle, and of course, looking to 2026 as a decision point on who's going to control the House of Representatives and who are the elected officials that are going to carry the banner for many of these issues. We do expect to be engaging voters in a real way on the this and other issues as well. What are your plans, as a C4 from the electoral perspective? What do you think are some of the messages that folks are listening to? As it relates to climate, but really as it impacts people in terms of their housing, clean air, clean water, as you mentioned, economics. Um, what are some of the messages that you think are connecting with folks?
Well, that's a great question, and you've heard him say it. You've heard his team say it. President Trump and their team like to claim a broad mandate for any number of different things. As I saw it, they had a mandate to do exactly one thing, and that was lower prices for the American people. The
But they
steps that
haven't done that.
they've taken us exactly in the wrong direction. The American people aren't stupid. I think I saw the president just did a long interview with Politico this morning. He was asked to grade himself for handling of the economy, and I think he said A plus 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 plus. If you ask anybody, just walk out your door and walk down the street and ask them the grade that they would give him for handling the economy, it would not be an A with 8 pluses after it. I'm not gonna, repeat plus, plus, plus all over again. We've seen costs continue to go up, and the specific policies that he's taken, and I mentioned at the top, in my space, trying to kill off clean energy and privilege coal, especially, which is the dirtiest, least effective, the economists around here would say that it is uneconomic, which is a term I don't often use because regular folks don't speak that way. But it just means that the decisions that they're making make no economic sense. They're causing everyone's bills to go up, and that has a particularly it's across the board. But Latinos, when energy bills go up, they feel those problems and those pains more acutely than other folks because their utility bill tends to be a higher portion of their everyday household expenses. So it's hurting all of us, but it's especially hurting the Latino community.
For sure. And in terms of policy, what are some of the things that we know the administration is not engaging in, but that they should be doing in order to address some of these concerns? What are we really fighting for?
Yeah, well, it would be a really good thing. And I just saw Senator Gallego came out with his energy plan last week. A cornerstone of his energy plan was restoring the tax credits that were taken away last summer in the president's so-called Big Beautiful Bill Act. Those tax credits were working. We saw ribbon cuttings and those big goofy giant checks in communities all across this country, and those jobs are going away. Companies are trying to make quiet announcements because nobody likes to be to say, "Hey, look at what I'm doing," when they're not able to keep their promises. But the underlying support for bringing some of those jobs to some of our communities is not there, and as a consequence, we're seeing those jobs go away. We're seeing people's bills go up every single day all across this country, and the way that utility bills work is kind of wonky, but like the utilities have to appeal to their local state-based regulator before they can increase rates and pass those additional costs on to you. So that's a process that actually leads, your bills actually going up. I just saw a report yesterday that said that in 49 of 50 states in the country, people's energy bills are going to go up. And in some cases, they're going to go up considerably. So not only have we gone in the wrong direction after the president promised that he'd cut everyone's bills in half over the first year, guess what? He's about a year in and they've gone up about 10, 15% all everywhere in the country. In 49 out of 50 states, we can expect them to go up considerably higher in the near term. It's incumbent upon groups like EDF Action and folks like me, with your help and with the help of others, to make sure that every voter knows exactly why their bills have gone up. And we've seen energy bills become a more salient issue in the elections in New Jersey and Virginia for governor this year. And they had, I talked about the regulator. In some states, it's called a public service commission, and in some states, it's elected. Georgia had two elections for public service commission. Energy bills weren't just an issue in those races. They were the only issues. They fired the regulators and brought in two new ones who said that they were going to be more on the side of ratepayers, who happen to be Democrats. That was a big deal in a state like Georgia, in a small election for a somewhat arcane office where nobody really knew exactly what would happen. Voters spoke very, very clearly that they weren't happy with the direction that things have been going.
Yes, and I think that part of that is the voter engagement and voter education, right? And that's part of the work that I know your organization does as well as ours. One of the questions that came up in the chat had to do with coastal communities, and we know that Latino communities in general are more likely to be impacted by climate change, whether it be uh, when we're talking about hurricanes or floods, but also as we talk about extreme heat, where Latinos are more than two times more likely to be seriously injured by extreme heat, partly as a result of the farm worker community, right? But we see more extreme weather events, whether it be wildfires or anything else. The question was, as it relates to what we're doing to engage coastal communities, but I think that it goes across the board in terms of what we're doing to engage underserved communities, right? Whether it be Latinos, but also the elderly, the poor. Can you tell me a little bit about your work in that respect in terms of voter education?
Certainly. Well, coastal resilience is an issue that people feel deeply. It's a place where EDF has worked deeply for a really, really long time. And just at a surface level, that's a place where we found that the old adage that you heard of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure has absolutely proven to be true. Investment in resilience, and it's not just, in some beachfront community somewhere. EDF was at the center of an effort in New York City, where you live, to pass, I think, $1 billion resilience bond. Because one of the things that we all learned from Superstorm Sandy is that none of us are immune to the impacts of climate change, that we are all suffering from and struggling from extreme weather events. that those are going to unfortunately going to get worse instead of better in the near term, and certainly get worse because the Trump administration seems to have a perverse desire to burn the dirtiest fossil fuels just for its own sake. They've landed in a place where they think that that's somehow a moral or civic benefit, and we know that it's not. So real communities are harmed and suffering. I was in the White House when Category 3 or 4 storm hit the Louisiana coast, and we were all terrified that this was going to be another Katrina or Rita. We saw in New York and New Jersey d deaths in the scores. I think, somewhere between 20 and 80 people were killed. There was only 1 death in Louisiana where it hit. That's because as the storm went inland, it wound up, generating more moisture, and more torrential rain fell, in places that were hundreds and hundreds of miles away from where the storm initially made landfall. That's abnormal in terms of weather patterns, but it's something that we can expect more and more of, if we don't do something to address the root cause.
For sure. And I would add that a perverse desire of the Trump administration to also cut on emergency relief funds for many of these extreme weather events that are impacting communities across the country. And I know we're running into time, so we want to be respectful to folks who joined. I want to thank everyone again for joining us for this important conversation on climate and Latino communities. I do want to get back to our recent report on the Climate Vulnerability Index, and I want to encourage folks to take a look if they want to map out across the country what are the communities that are seeing the most impact. Is there a website where folks can go?
Yes, I believe just Google Climate Vulnerability Index and maybe EDF, and you'll be taken there. It is a really, really cool tool, a really cool series of maps. And what we intended to do with this report that EDF put out alongside the Latino Victory Foundation was just to drill down into 3 communities with substantial Hispanic populations and show exactly how the tool works and show how its impacts are felt in those communities. I was really, really happy to join you for an event with 4 members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus just a week or so before Thanksgiving. I was struck, and I keep thinking about something that Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, who represents East Houston, which is one of the areas that is highlighted in this report, said in her remarks. She said, "In our community, we've always felt it. Now, with this data, we know it." That's exactly the role that groups like EDF, with the help of their C4 partners and other dear friends and partners like Latino Victory, can do is lift up some of these tools, point to their impact, and say, we know that these harms are happening here and that help is needed in these communities, and we can prove it. We've got the receipts.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate you saying that. And of course, I want to thank everyone for joining. Again, this is Catherine Pichardo, President and CEO at Latino Victory. For additional information, we're going to make sure to post the link on our website as well, latinovictory.org. Please continue to join us for these weekly substacks on important issues impacting our community. Thank you to partners like EDF Action. We have a lot of work ahead of us, my friends, as we move on to these midterm elections and ensuring that we have the right kind of representatives who are going to push back on the administration and ensure that our communities will be protected. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks,
Thank you,
David.
Catherine.
Bye bye.